80's scandals that would shut down the internet today. Big hair, neon everything, and movies you had to physically rewind. Yep, the 80's had a certain glow, a feeling that things were simpler, maybe even innocent. Spoiler alert, they absolutely were not. While the rest of us were busy trying to tape our favorite songs off the radio without the DJ talking over the intro, some of the decade's biggest and brightest icons were quietly racking up stories so messy, so genuinely chaotic, they would melt today's internet. We're not just talking about a bad tweet or a clumsy red carpet moment. We're talking about felony arrests that never trended, major cover-ups that never fully surfaced, and volcanic headlines that vanished faster than a Pac-Man power pellet. These were stories that, in a world without TMZ, Twitter, or TikTok, could be managed, massaged, and sometimes completely buried. So get ready to pull back the curtain on a time before every celebrity mistake became a global trending topic. Ready to see what the pre-Google, pre-social media gossip mill managed to keep hidden in plain sight? Before we get started, please like and subscribe for more stories like this. Number 8. Sean Penn, the quintessential bad boy heartthrob, who was also, according to police reports and his then-wife Madonna, an absolute nightmare at home. In 1985, he was riding high, fresh off movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, newly married to the biggest pop star on the planet, Madonna, and already establishing a violent reputation. He was constantly swinging at photographers, even being arrested after attacking 2 journalists with a rock. In another incident in Macau, while filming Shanghai Surprise, he and his assistant dangled a photographer over a 9th-floor balcony. He even served jail time for punching an extra on the set of the film Colors. But the most shocking event came at the end of their marriage. Fast forward to New Year's 1989. Police were called to the couple's Malibu house. According to the initial police report filed by Madonna, an enraged Penn had terrorized her for 9 hours. The report alleged that he bound her to a chair with heavy twine, threatened her, and physically assaulted her before she managed to escape and flee to the sheriff's office. When she arrived, a lieutenant on duty stated he hardly recognized her, noting she was weeping, her lip was bleeding, and she had obviously been struck. Penn faced serious felony charges and years in prison. Then, poof, it all went away. Madonna requested to have the charges dropped. The case vanished, and the marriage was over. Today, the very idea is unfathomable. The 911 call would be leaked before the dispatcher hung up. Body cam footage would be analyzed frame by frame on every news network and social media platform. Sponsors would sprint for the exits, and his career would be put on an immediate, indefinite hold. Number 7. The tragic death of Marvin Gaye, shot and killed by his own father. This happened on April Fool's Day, 1984, but there were zero jokes to be found. The relationship between Gaye and his father, Marvin Gaye Sr., had been bitter and abusive for decades. Marvin Sr., a preacher, was reportedly envious of his son's massive success and governed his family with a brutal hand. After a period of struggling with debt and drug abuse, Gaye had moved back into his parents' Los Angeles home. On that fateful day, the day before Gaye's 45th birthday, he intervened in an argument between his parents over a misplaced insurance document. The argument escalated into a physical fight where Gaye reportedly pushed and kicked his father. A short time later, his father walked into Marvin's bedroom with the .38 special pistol that Marvin himself had gifted him for protection and fired 2 shots. The first shot was fatal, piercing Gaye's heart, lung, and liver. The papers of the day called it a family spat. But court documents painted a much darker picture of years of jealousy and abuse. The father claimed self-defense, was charged with voluntary manslaughter, pleaded no contest, and walked away with a 6-year suspended sentence and probation. He never served a day in jail. If the audio of that 911 call or the subsequent police interview where the father reportedly said, "Let's say I didn't dislike him," hit the internet today, the backlash would be immense. Every streamer would yank Marvin's catalog within minutes. Hashtags like #justice for Marvin would burn for months, and think pieces analyzing the toxic family dynamic would dominate every media outlet. Instead, MTV just kept spinning sexual healing, and the world kept on dancing. Number 6. Rob Lowe's home movie nightmare. Picture it. July 1988, Atlanta, the night before the Democratic National Convention. Rob Lowe was at the peak of his Brat Pack fame, a teen idol campaigning for presidential candidate Michael Dukakis. After a night out, he ended up in his hotel room with 2 women and a camcorder, making a series of very poor decisions. A week later, the tape surfaced, and the story exploded. One of the women on the tape was only 16 years old. Now, legally, Lowe caught a strange break. At the time, the age of consent in Georgia was just 14, so no statutory charges were filed. However, because the girl was under 18, filming her was a potential crime. To avoid criminal charges, Lowe agreed to perform 20 hours of community service in his hometown. The scandal was immediate and damaging. Pepsi yanked his ads, the phone stopped ringing for major roles, and Lowe's career went into a deep freeze before he eventually entered rehab. Imagine that same clip surfacing in a group chat now. It wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be a Category 5 digital hurricane. FBI agents would be trending on every timeline as online sleuths demanded a federal investigation. Memes would fly faster than you can say Brat Pack, and every streamer and studio would bury his filmography, starting with St. Elmo's Fire. The story would be a fixture on cable news for weeks, fueling a massive, unrelenting debate about celebrity, power, and consent. Instead, while it was a huge story, it eventually faded, and we all just kept renting his movies anyway. Number 5. Todd Bridges, a crack cocaine addiction, and a gun. By 1989, the wholesome image of Willis from Different Strokes was a distant memory. Todd Bridges was deep in the throes of a severe crack addiction, a spiral that led him to a drug house in South Central LA. The scandal erupted when Bridges was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of a drug dealer named Kenneth Tex Clay. Cops said Bridges shot the man 8 times over a stolen car. Bridges claimed it was self-defense during a chaotic drug house showdown. What followed was a 3-year legal circus. Bridges was in and out of court, facing a barrage of charges from cocaine possession to assault with a firearm. Represented by the soon-to-be-famous Johnny Cochran, his defense argued that he was an abused former child star, exploited by the industry, and now being framed. After an initial jury acquitted him of attempted murder but deadlocked on assault, a second jury acquitted him completely. Todd later admitted he was smoking crack daily and carrying what he called paranoia insurance, a .357 Magnum. Drop that saga into today's Reddit AMA, and the fallout would be catastrophic. A beloved child star admitting to heavy drug use and being involved in a violent shooting? Netflix would cancel the Different Strokes reboot before the press release was even written. Every podcast and YouTube channel would produce multi-part docuseries dissecting his downfall. The discourse would be relentless, a firestorm of judgment, sympathy, and morbid curiosity. Instead, the story was covered, but it never became the cultural phenomenon it would be today. Jet magazine ran a blurb, and insomniacs just kept watching the wholesome reruns at 3 a.m. Number 4. Chuck Berry's bathroom camera bingo. It was 1989, and the rock and roll pioneer was the owner of the Southern Air, a restaurant in Missouri. That December, a former cook named Hosanna Huck filed a lawsuit alleging that Berry had installed a hidden video camera in the ladies' restroom. The lawsuit claimed the tapes were made to gratify Berry's sexual fetishes. Soon after, more women came forward, and it snowballed into a class action lawsuit joined by nearly 60 other women, all claiming they had been secretly recorded in various states of undress. In 1990, police raided Barry's home and seized videotapes that confirmed the hidden camera setup. The restaurant closed down, and Barry, while claiming he didn't know who set up the cameras, eventually settled the lawsuits for over $1.2 million. He managed to sidestep criminal charges, partly due to legal technicalities and statutes of limitations, and incredibly, just kept on gigging at his famous Blueberry Hill residency in St. Louis like nothing ever happened. In 2025, this story would be an absolute internet breaker. One single blurred screen grab from those tapes would ignite every mom group on Facebook and every corner of X. Venues would cancel his shows overnight, and his music would be wiped from corporate playlists. Protesters would demand his statue be taken down, likely face-planting it into the Missouri River. The scandal would be a top story for weeks on end. Back then, Rolling Stone barely cleared its throat on page 23. Number 3. Madonna versus the Pope. In 1989, Madonna wasn't just a pop star. She was a cultural phenomenon about to trigger a global controversy. She signed a massive $5 million endorsement deal with Pepsi, a collaboration set to launch her new single, Like a Prayer. The Pepsi commercial itself was tame, but the day after it aired, the official music video premiered on MTV, and all hell broke loose. The video was a whirlwind of provocative imagery: burning crosses, stigmata, and Madonna sharing a steamy kiss with a black saint. The backlash was immediate and fierce. The Vatican didn't just disapprove, it outright condemned the video as blasphemous, with Pope John Paul II personally encouraging fans to boycott Madonna's upcoming tour in Italy. Religious groups around the world erupted in protest, bombarding Pepsi with complaints. Under immense pressure, Pepsi buckled. They pulled the commercial, which had only aired once, and canceled Madonna's entire contract, though she famously got to keep the $5 million fee. Her response to the chaos was a simple shrug. Art should be controversial. Imagine that video dropping today. It would hit 1 billion views in 2 days. The hashtag #CancelPepsi would trend globally, fueled by an endless tsunami of boycott gifs. Catholic Facebook would flood every single comment thread with outrage. Pundits on all sides would debate for weeks, turning it into a full-blown culture war. Instead, MTV simply moved the video to a late-night slot, and life, for the most part, just rolled on. Number 2. Oral Roberts' Heavenly Shakedown. In January 1987, the popular televangelist Oral Roberts delivered an urgent and utterly bizarre message to his followers. He stood before the cameras and claimed that a 900-foot-tall Jesus had appeared to him. This apparition, he said, gave him a divine ultimatum: raise $8 million by March, or God will call me home. The plea was a massive success. Checks poured in, mostly from elderly, devoted followers on fixed incomes, desperate to keep the televangelist alive. He met his goal just in time, with the final donations coming from a Florida dog track owner. But the controversy didn't end there. The money was intended for a massive medical school and hospital complex called the City of Faith, but the project ultimately failed and closed its doors just a couple of years later. Roberts essentially blamed a lack of faith for the failure, and the IRS, along with other authorities, seemed to just yawn and look the other way. Try pulling that grift on GoFundMe today. The campaign page would be nuked by payment processors before the first dollar was even donated. Late-night hosts like John Oliver and Stephen Colbert would roast him into orbit for weeks on end. 900-foot Jesus would own the timeline, spawning thousands of memes, deepfake videos, and scathing op-eds. It would be a relentless digital pile-on, exposing the grift in real time. But in the 80s, the 700 Club just handed him a soft focus interview We all shook our heads and then flipped the channel. And number one, Richard Pryor, freebase cocaine and a flaming rum cocktail. On the evening of June 9th, 1980, the legendary comedian was in the midst of a multi-day drug binge. In a state of cocaine-induced psychosis, Pryor doused himself in 151 proof rum, lit a match, and became a human fireball. He then ran out of his house and down the street, on fire, for nearly a mile before police were able to subdue him and get him to a hospital. He suffered third-degree burns on over 50% of his body and was given only a 1 in 3 chance to live. The official story, spun by his team to protect his image, was that it was a freak accident while mixing rum and coke while freebasing. But years later, Pryor gave his own real talk on the matter. I was trying to kill myself. After 6 grueling weeks in a burn unit, he did something only Richard Pryor could do. He turned the excruciating pain and raw trauma into comedic genius, forming the searing, brilliant centerpiece of his 1982 concert film, Richard Pryor, live on the Sunset Strip. Today, the 9/11 tape would surface before the ambulance even reached the ER. Every news chyron would scream, self-immolation. The internet would explode, with armchair Twitter doctors endlessly debating addiction versus a mental health crisis until the servers fried. The story would be a vortex of morbid fascination and intense public scrutiny. Instead, Johnny Carson just slipped in a few tactful jokes on The Tonight Show. And somehow, we all found a way to laugh harder than ever. And there you have it, 8 seismic scandals that prove the 80s really did run on a different operating system. One built on hush money, powerful publicists, and rotary phones. Unleash any one of these bombs in today's algorithmic coliseum, and the internet itself would need its own burn unit. The past truly is a foreign country. They did things differently there. Which one of these stories floored you the most? Do you think these stars would have survived cancel culture? Drop your pick and your thoughts in the comments below. Smash that like button if you want to see a deep dive into 90s disasters next. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stroll down a very messy memory lane. Flames, lawsuits, and all.